Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, with special guest cat Pipo, here to talk about Federico Mompou. And I knew that she would join me for Mompou, because if ever there was a composer made for your cat, it was Mompou. And having done that, I'm going to let you go have your dinner now. Thank you very much for joining me. Yes, you take care. Thank you, honey. Okay. Mompou. Who the hell was Mompou? Mom who, you may want to say. Well, Mompou. It's this guy, Mompou. He's actually quite popular. His music has been quite frequently recorded, but he was a very, very, very unique composer. His dates were 1893 to 1987. And like a lot of Spanish composers, he was a Spanish composer who lived to be like 150 and only wrote 3 pieces of music. It's something Spanish composers do. I mean, think about it. You've got Manuel de Falla, who wrote 12 pieces of music. I mean, he wrote the same ones over and over again and transcribed them back and forth. But basically, he lived to a fairly decent age. I think it was late 70s, early 80s. I don't know. He wrote nothing, especially for the whole latter half of his life. And then there was Halfter. Remember, we talked about his Sinfonietta. We did a video about it. It's magnificent, fabulous piece. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful music. Halfter's great. He wrote 3 pieces of music. That was it. I mean, there's no music in large forms. There are practically no Spanish symphonies. There was, remember Turina? He wrote the Sinfonia Sevillana, finally, sort of kind of a symphony, but it's really 3-tone poems, a small bit of orchestral music, tons of piano music, though. Lots and lots of piano music. Same thing with Albéniz. It's fascinating that Spanish composers, it's a world unto itself. It really is. And Mompou is, in some ways, the quintessential Spanish composer among Spanish composers, because his output is extremely small. There's a handful of piano works, a few songs, 2 oratorios, a ballet that he wrote as a collaboration with Montsalvace, who actually wrote a lot of music, but he came later. So basically, there's very, very little music. But what he did write was exquisite. Like Falla, his music was marvelously polished. He sweated over it for years. It's incredible. And if you're going to start listening to Mompou, I mean, there are lots of excellent individual discs, but you might as well just go whole hog and get, the whole collected piano works, which all fit on 4 CDs, and you can get them played by Mompou himself. Yes, he was a very good pianist. And, the thing that's interesting about his own performances is, like composers so often who do their own music, his performances are extremely unaffected, very, very simple, beautifully. He lets the music speak for itself. He really, really does. And there are other performances. I mean, there's a Stephen Huff disc that's great. There's Jenny Lin, who did the Musica, callada, which we'll talk about in a second, which is wonderful. And plenty of excellent discs of Mompou by many great pianists. In terms of style, well, who is he most like? I would probably say he's quite similar in some ways to Satie. The Satie of the Gymnopédie, that extremely stripped down simplicity. But in a wider sense, in a broader sense, and he belongs to that group of composers with what I like to call hermetically sealed styles. He wrote in a completely interior, extremely circumscribed way, but with incredible mastery. The ultimate example of that was probably Duparc, who wrote 12 songs and then died. I mean, there's more, but that's all we care about now. But think about Dukas. He was a guy sort of like that. Or Anton Webern, in a completely different style, but also one of those incredibly pin-polished, diamantine, just that's what he was. And his music is wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And I'm just going to go through this fantastic Brilliant Classics box. I've got samples of 4 works. Since nothing he wrote was more than about 3 minutes long, I can play you complete works or bits of works. And with Mompou, comes with this very nice booklet. talks all about him, with lots of quotations from him, where he talks about his music's transcendent inwardness and intimacy and interiority and indefinableness, and all the words that begin with the letters I-N. That kind of stuff. He's an in composer, indefinable, indescribable, it's ineffable, all of that stuff. And it really is. It's quite wonderful, the music. It really is. Even if the style is limited, he knew what he could do and he mastered it completely. So let's take a look at what's in the box, the 4 CDs, and I can play you some samples and you'll get a sense of it much better than I can talk about it. In fact, his really major statement is the Musica callada, music of silence. Don't you just love those contradictory titles? In fact, there are sort of 4 kinds of music that he wrote, his piano pieces. There's fantasy music, and that's Musica callada. Music is the contradictory titles, things about dreams and things that are far away and imaginary and that kind of stuff, slightly impressionistic, although he wasn't really an impressionist. But Musica callada, music of silence, has 4 books and a total of 28 pieces, and they were composed between, 1959 and 1967. And I'm going to play you the complete Book 1, number 8, because it's only 39 seconds long. Here it is. Have a listen. See what I mean by the music being completely stripped down to its essence? It really is. I mean, there's no fat in this music at all. Every single note tells. And this is, the essence of his style. Musica callada is his great masterpiece. It's actually inspired by some sort of transcendental religious poetry by St. John the something or other, but I can't be bothered with that. And unless you're going to read transcendental religious poetry, you won't want to be bothered by that either. It's beautiful music. Beautiful, serene, great for quiet listening. And what's so wonderful about his music is the freedom of his harmony. I mean, because there's no counterpoint going on here. I mean, but his harmony is completely original and personal, often quite dissonant, but extremely haunting. And that's what gives his music, I think, so much of its character and so much of its color. So disc number 2 contains the songs and dances. This is his other sort of major statement as a group. The songs and dances were composed between 1921 and 1962. A bunch of them were dedicated to various people. Alicia de la Rocha recorded a bunch of them. She played Mompou, and he dedicated a couple of them to her. And these are just lovely works. I'm going to play you number 1, which is from 1921. This is they are, of course, in Spanish. Canzones y dances. Here is numero 1. It's a little livelier than Musica callada, as you can tell, a little more secular. And, you do hear perhaps a little bit of Mompou, the songwriter. He wrote lovely songs, not very many of them, but they're quite beautiful. And this was the song and dance sequence was sort of the earthier side of his output. So that was sort of the other kind of music that he wrote. He wrote dance pieces a la, Chopin and other composers who wrote mazurkas and polonaises. Well, he wrote dances in the more abstract sense, songs and dances, but the human side of music, not the mystical, not the transcendental. And then disc number 3 contains a series of works here. He wrote a series of preludes, which is the third kind of music he wrote. The third kind of music are purely abstract piano pieces, preludes, variations, things like that. The preludes occupied him from 1927 to 1960. I mean, he took his time. There are 11 of them. And then he wrote a series of variations on a theme of Chopin. The theme is the 7th Chopin prelude. And he wrote these between 1938 and 1957. And I'm going to play you one of the variations. I'm going to play you variation number 7, which is Allegro Leggero, from the Variations on a Theme of Chopin. Have a listen. Charmant, is it not? It really is. It's terrific. Also on this disc are the trois variations, variaciones. Actually, he did it in French, trois variations, which has a theme, and then they're nicknamed les soldats, the soldiers, courtois and nocturne. And then there are 2 pieces called dialogues, and then there's the Souvenir de l'Exposition of 1937, and then on disc number 4, let's see what we have here. Did I have something else I wanted to play you? Wait a minute, let me see if I had something else. Oh, I did. I have something else to play you. Yes, but we'll get to it in a moment. And then in disc number 4, we have the Impressiones Intimas, intimate impressions. That's one of his interior works. Scènes d'enfant, scenes from childhood. Doesn't everyone do one of those? And then Passebres, which are nativity scenes. And we have charms. These are incantations. This is from his magical sort of fantasy period. Suburbis, which is the suburbs, which has all kinds of interesting things, gypsies and whatnot in it. And Fêtes lointaines, distant festivals. Somewhat similar to Debussy's Nocturnes, I would think. And again, that's one of his fantasy pieces. But the 4th type that I'm also going to play you something from is just keyboard character pieces, programmatic pieces with titles, which you've seen some, childhood scenes and nativity scenes and suburbis, things like that. And on disc number 2 here, we have one called, wait a minute, this is disc number 3, disc number 2. Here we are. Got it. Oh, I can't believe it. Yes, after the songs and dances, I forgot. There's Canción de Cuna, another song, and then Kant's Magics, Magic Chants, one of his magical fantasy works. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. And then there's Paisajes, landscapes. Paisajes. And one of them is called La Fuente y la Campana, The Fountain and the Bell. It turns out that his father or grandfather or someone like that owned a bell foundry. So the sound of bells is quite popular, and in his music it happens. And like for example the bell scene, the opening coronation scene of Boris Godunov, or the Russian Easter Overture. Where you have that bum, psh, boom, psh, dum, that kind of thing. Well, you'll hear that here. His music does that quasi-Russian bell imitation thing. So here is The Fountain and the Bells. Now, as you can tell, even at his most, what you might call obstreperous, he was a gentle guy. His music all has a certain calmness, a kind of, even the last of the Chopin variations is a gallop. And it gallops after a fashion, it does. But Mompou's style was always, how do you describe it? It's like the Spanish language itself. I think the best word is courtly. There's a certain aristocratic poise, a finish, a gentility to his music that's completely without affectation. It just was what it was. There isn't anything, snotty or effete about it. Nothing like that at all, because its harmonic acerbity keeps it crispy, gives it a certain edge that keeps it from ever turning, into marshmallow fluff, if you know what I mean. So it's really wonderful music, absolutely wonderful music. And this is an inexpensive, it's like $20, 20 something bucks, 4 discs, in a beautiful little box, or sometimes they come in a jewel case, on brilliant classics with Mompou performing it all. So how often do we really have a chance to have a composer of this kind of character and of this level of quality performing all of his own music that matters, and very well, and it's very well recorded. This one, I've had this for so long, you'll notice it still has the Qualitone Imports sticker. For those of you who remember Qualitone Imports, it doesn't exist anymore, sadly. Lovely, lovely people. A terrific little company. But anyway, you can get it from Brilliant Classics, and you really ought to. If you don't know Mompou's music, you've heard a good sampling of it now, you know what you're going to get. Please feel free to indulge and keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me. Take care.